Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and today we've got Matthew Putnam, who is the Community and Growth Lead at Twain. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Chris.
Of course, tell us a little bit about Twain, what you guys do. I know you've been there for just about under a year, but let us know what that looks like and what you guys are doing and what kind of companies you guys are working with.
Yeah, sure thing. Look, I joined Twain just under a year ago from a product advisory perspective. So Mo reached out to me. My life has just been sales and marketing, but predominantly within that top of funnel. So reaching out to prospects through email, cold calling, you name it, and then grabbing their attention to book meetings. That's been at the last few companies, and Mo and the team were building this tool, which was basically helping sales reps and sales teams communicate better with their prospects through email and on LinkedIn, because the reality is AI has taken the world by storm. And I think people have been burnt by their experience with AI, where they haven't really been getting the experience they wanted. Maybe the emails weren't human enough or weren't representing what they were trying to get across correctly. So their whole mission is just, that's the war they're fighting. They're like, we want to make sure we've got a tool that doesn't give people that experience. Instead, it's
Yep.
like creates a way of communicating with people which is more natural and gets results, right? So I was just there originally to help review the product, what I liked, what I didn't like, feature ideas and things like that. And then fast forward 9 months into doing that, and I think the team were at a point where they were like, we want to go big on community-led growth. Like, we've got an amazing community already, we're launching paid, and we want someone to work with us on that. And in my perspective, I was like, this is interesting, because I've been an SDR leader and a
Mm-hmm.
senior one at that for years, and it was a bit of an alien idea for me to shift to something like this. But I'd been using the product for 9 months. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I was like, and I'm big on making content on LinkedIn. I've been doing that for the last year. I've really grown my, I suppose, brand on LinkedIn. And it kind of, there was some synergies there where it's like, can we utilize that and my experience and use that to support the community and drive more users and things like that. So 7 interviews later, I've joined Twain. But that's what it is, right? It's a co-pilot for writing sales messages to your prospects. It understands who you are. It understands your prospects' problems, and then it basically pairs up, your solution to their problem in a way that actually makes nice reads for emails and LinkedIn messages.
Got it. And so you've actually been in like in sales for almost a decade now. I mean, tell us, or a little bit over a decade, but tell us like how did you get involved into it in the first place? What was the interest there? I feel like a lot of people land into sales marketing roles, end up like somehow coincidentally landing into that space. But let me know, like, is that something that you had an innate curiosity towards when you were younger, or is it just something that developed over time?
I think like a lot of people probably fell into it. Uh, Dabbled with selling cookies at school when I was younger, right? And I kind of wasn't ready to commit to going to university, to be honest. So I took time off, moved to Australia, like a lot of Brits do, and ran out of money very quickly. So a necessity for a job became quite apparent. So one of the first jobs I was able to get was literally selling raffle tickets for the surf lifesavers out there and the Australian Paralympic team. And it was fascinating, right? Because it was like, again, I've always been quite, I probably don't always weigh up risk in the best manner. And, in my head, there should have been red flags going like, there is no salary in this job. It is literally, you get paid what you sell and so on. But anyway, jumped into it, and it was, going door to door, going into businesses and just selling raffle tickets, right? And that was the beginning of it. And I ended up doing that for 3 years and just loved it, right? I had a really good time in Australia. It was a really good lifestyle. But I think it got to the point where I was like, I don't know where this is going to go. And, a few of my friends had mentioned around like getting into B2B SaaS sales. And this was thriving in London at the time. So I thought maybe this is a good time to come back to the UK and see if I can get into SaaS sales. And started doing that, doing exactly that, to be honest. So I joined a couple of organizations, mainly doing SDR work. And that's like, again, booking the meetings, getting people interested in our services, then joined a company as an account exec, and they were a startup. And again, I think where I thrived there was booking the meetings. And do you know what, to be honest, I wasn't so good at closing the business at the time, which was fascinating. And it's like, yeah, my strength was getting the initial attraction with people and getting people hooked on the phone, and then shifted into SDR management, and I've basically been in SDR management and leadership for the last 6 and a bit years. And God, I sometimes wonder how many like cold calls I've done and how many emails I've written with my team. And I'd love to know what that stat is. I'd love to. But yeah, that's basically been what the transition's been. So it's funny that raffle tickets to booking meetings and then to managing other than helping other people book meetings.
Got it. On that note, I mean, I would say, how much, a couple of questions. So number one would be, as somebody who's gone through the SDR game, AE game, like how do you, maybe looking back in hindsight, what were some of your best experiences and what are some of the things that, a up and coming SDR or AE should be looking at for them to position themselves for success, right? I think like, obviously making sure you have a good product, but, great team environment, great communication, but what are some of the things that you're looking back on and it's like, oh, I was successful there because of these things. And if I was to do it over again, these are the things I would look for.
Yeah, look, I think where things worked and where things didn't work, when I think back to like what was probably the driving factor behind it, was my ability to understand the person's problem and make them the main character. And there are so many scenarios where I didn't book the meeting or I lost the deal because I was probably too self-focused on myself and what I wanted to achieve. I wanted the commission, I wanted to book the meeting. And the reality is, like, people, like, naturally we are somewhat self-centered, right? That's naturally what people are doing things for a reason, and usually that reason is to benefit themselves, right? So the quicker you can shift into thinking like, I need to benefit the other person, you then suddenly you're able to do so many different things. You're able to communicate a lot more effectively with them because you're making them the main character in the story. And when they're the main character and you can demonstrate that you understand them, they're going to want to listen to you. But doing that is hard, right? They're actually going like, I want to make the focus about you, Chris. This is what I understand about you. How do you personalize and how do you make that relevant? But that is where, when you have those opportunities and you've got the information to do that, that's when this whole sales journey becomes a lot easier. How do you communicate that? And it's funny because I think about the ones, where it didn't go that well. And at the end of the day, is because I was missing something about them, or I didn't understand something about them or their situation. It was always something to do with them that I was missing or I didn't ask about. So I think my advice to new and upcoming SDRs and sales reps is like, shift your mindset to everything is about them. There must be a decent why for your reach out to them. So like, and it's even with how we do things at Twain now, right? And when we work with our clients, it's literally every message is crafted in a way where you open with the problem that's relevant to your ICP. That's the first bit that anyone sees, because it's like, if that they don't see that and all they see is, hi Chris, we do this and we do that and we've helped this, it's like, great, like I'm happy for you, but this has got nothing to do with what I need right now. So it's like, just make it about them. Every opener, every question you're asking, it's always about them. It's not about you trying to fill in a qualification form or book a meeting. Book a meeting once you know that you can help them with a problem they definitely have right now because you've qualified it and you've got a solution that fixes it, right? So that would probably be my big tip.
Got it. Also, I would say, like, as you mentioned, you've been booking meetings through how many cold calls, how many emails and LinkedIn messages and the whole nine, but how do you feel like that realm has shifted? I think, if you're LinkedIn, you obviously notice this, especially if you're like those sales and marketing communities. But I think like in the past 6 months, like since the start of this year, things have shifted quite a bit. Obviously, if you look at the past like year and a half, it's even more monumental in terms of how things have changed. What are you noticing as part of what you're doing at Twain? This idea around doubling down and tripling down on community as part of your growth model. Is that something you think would have been a primary focus when you first started out 5 years ago? How has that shifted? Why is that now a focus? Just kind of curious on your thoughts on that.
I mean, there's a few angles to look at this. This is a brilliant topic, and there's depth to this, right? I think a few things have to be, there has to be a few scenarios correct for you to be able to focus on community, to be honest, because, one, as a rep, if you want to be able to focus on community, that pays dividends in the long run, because people then learn who you are, they learn to trust you and so on. But you've got to be able to commit to an industry to be able to do so. But for a company to focus on community, I think the thing where, when it's done really well, the trust you then build with your audience and your customers is unlike anything. Like, people they want to be part of the journey. They feel like they're being heard. They feel like they're being looked after, and they have a passion for the product you're selling because of the two previous points, right? So, it then becomes an engine that sort of feeds itself after a period of time. To get it to that point is really hard, and it takes a lot, and you've got to be able to demonstrate that you're listening and like, we've heard you, this is our solution, let us know what you think. And you've got to keep doing that until like people are like, we love this, like, this is great. And we've seen a bit of that with Twain. We've seen that with the announcement of Twain and Clay. I think from an individual standpoint, it's a bit harder to do this, right? Like, me jumping into community led with Twain made sense because of I've been really big on LinkedIn, like, with regards to posting and what audience do I want to build. And I think, like, last year I built a platform called Sales Upskill, and it's free for people to access. It's just all my cheat sheets and things like that. But I knew in my head, I want to help SDRs, account execs, SDR managers, and sales leaders. I was like, that's the audience I want to help. And then I built up my own community through that. And then, fast forward to Twain, and brilliant, the audience is similar to the audience to Twain. So, I started with a separate goal, and that goal is very much aligned with Twain's goal. And that was, it's almost coincidence. And it's almost like the situation I put myself in previously meant that my community could mix with Twain's community and so on. But that's then the focus. I think if you want to then do this community-led sales approach, you've got to go like, well, it's about them. It's the same point as before, right? What can I offer you that's going to help you, that's going to keep you in my community? And, a lot of the stuff I've done, probably about 95% of the stuff I've created, I've asked for nothing in return. It's just been, is this useful? People have gone yes for some, they've gone no for others. So we double down on the stuff that's yes. And over time, that's built and built and built. And, I think my LinkedIn grew from, in the last 10 months, it's gone from 10,000 people to 31,000 people, right? And again, am I a millionaire from it? No, but that was also never the goal, right? But, I had to give a lot for that. So it's really possible, but you've got to then go, okay, well, who's the person I want to focus on with this? What's useful to them? Okay, let's go create it, get feedback on it, and rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And then people just come back after.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I think, like, with what you guys are doing at Twain, I think, yeah, I'm curious as to how you guys look at leveraging AI maybe a little bit differently, because there's a lot of noise out there. And I think about just like, even from like an outbound perspective, right? Like, things are a hack until everybody does it. I think about like outbound, right? And like, outbound really gained a lot of steam in the past, I think, 5 years, right? I think before that, people spent a lot of time trying to adopt the thing like the consumer-led growth metrics around like paid ads and like doing things like that to drive your traffic and SEO and things. And then outbound became something really big. And then I remember when it kind of started off, it was like, it was a thing. It's like, if you had to be very, almost like, I think like how people look at like people who know how to leverage AI for building out these complex, go-to-market models. Like, now it's like, if you knew how to do that, but in this very like fragmented way, leveraging like 3 or 4 different tools 5 years ago. And then like everybody started doing it. And then you have like all these, big suppliers of software that helped you do it at scale. And now we're seeing this shift, right? I think like the Apollos of the world, the Zoom Infos of the world are suffering a little bit, because like the ability to get data now is like, it's pretty open and wide, and they're only solving for a portion of that puzzle, right? Versus now you can utilize a bunch of tools to, like Clay, like Twain, to not only aggregate the data, but then like clean it in real time, and then also like be able to generate the outreaches from the same system or from the same place without having to go anywhere else. What are you thinking about that? Like, how is that landscape shifted, especially because we've seen these big behemoths like Apollo and ZoomInfo gain a lot of traction, and I know they're still big, and I know a lot of people still use them, but like, where do you see that going? Especially now that there's these tools that allow a new, maybe like a new type of growth mindset, new type of growth hack.
And like the last 5 years, it's just been wild how it's changed, right? It's just been wild. But I think you think about what's actually happened, right? We've the last 5 years. Well, before that, there were tools which allowed you to reach out to prospects en masse. So you could hire an SDR function, get them on the phones, get them sending 500 emails a day, and so on. And then that basically, we've just had all these tools become available to us that enable that mass outreach approach. And the problem with that is more people did it. And honestly, there wasn't enough training on any of this stuff. On one, how to use it, two, actually how to communicate with people. So then the market has just been flooded with terrible emails, terrible LinkedIn messages. And arguably, I think actually in some cases, actually the cold calls are probably the best element of it.
Yep.
Because I think a lot of people think that's the hardest bit of the lot, and therefore put the most effort into it and develop that further. When actually, and then they say that email and LinkedIn doesn't work because they're not getting any responses. But the reality is they're not putting anywhere near as much time into developing those two skills, because it's still communication, just in a different form. So then inboxes are inundated, and then these new tools are popping up where it's allowing relevancy and triggers to be pulled through via the internet. So I kind of think about it in 3 areas. It's like, do you have good data? So therefore you need data or some form of data source. Then you need a way of organizing it and understanding triggers, which is like, what Clay's been fantastic at doing. And then there's the third bit, which is the communication part, right? And some companies are trying to do all three, but the problem is, because they're doing all three, they're not doing as well at all three as if they're niching down. So I think we're going to see a lot more companies pop up. I think you'll then see a lot more companies like Twain pop up, and I think we'll have more competitors in the future where it's like, look, all we want to do is help with that message. You get the data. We then provide the relevancy and the structure of the conversation and how that works, because that's the bit we're obsessed about. And I think that's what we're going to start to see. And, probably then the Goliaths will purchase these people and purchase their infrastructure and embed that into their software. I mean, I think I've seen a lot of conversations like that where you've got two different suppliers who specialize in two different things. And instead of let's compete, let's go to market together, because you do that bit really well, we do the management bit really well, let's embed you into what we do. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. But I think the one thing is, like, people want the easy answer every single time, and it's like, whatever's going to get me there quicker. Can I just get 1,000 leads and message them something? And I think that's the bit where people are going to continue to get stuck. And it's like, until you find a way to make it relevant and personalized to the person you're reaching out to, like, you're probably always going to do this for a few months, and then you're going to be like, this doesn't work, let's try something else. It's fascinating. I mean, there's over 1,000 companies on top of funnel that are AI powered. They do something, or they do a lot of things, right? It's fascinating. There's so much out there.
Yeah. Interesting. Out of curiosity, I think like being in that space, what gets your attention, right? Like, have you ever bought anything from cold outreach? And if so, do you remember what it was and why you did so?
Yeah, I mean, previous company, Cognism. My Cognism license was from cold outreach, and it was like a nice, short, sharp email, and then they just followed up really well. But they followed up, and it was funny actually, because there's that whole battle, Cognism, ZoomInfo. And I remember, I don't know whether I was just annoyed, which led me to think Cognism. I think both suppliers are better at their local area for data. I think Cognizant for Europe, Zoom Info for the US. I don't know how it's changed, right? I haven't used them for a while.
Yep.
But I remember at the time I was being pitched by both, and Cognizant called me a lot less, but they called me when I asked them to call me. And I'm not saying like that means all Zoom Info sales reps can't do that. But I just remember the Zoom Info rep at the time who was calling me. It was intense. It was intense. Like at points once a week, I asked like, and at that point I was like, you're all right, actually, don't worry about it. And I remember this Cognizant sales rep, I'm trying to remember his name now, called me on the day I asked him to call, and it was like, well, one, I've told him to call me today, so I was like, I hear you out. I'll pitch this to the CEO and let's see. And you know, it worked, and bam, we purchased. But I think like the outreach that does work with me as well, there's two. Like LinkedIn is so unutilized.
Yeah.
People realize how powerful LinkedIn is. And you know, I will answer pretty much most messages that I get sent with a polite, you know, no thanks if it's not something that's relevant.
Yep.
Some feedback if I think I could give them some advice. You know, some people aren't always open to that. Or, you know, like let's have a conversation if I'm interested. But like people are spending a lot of time on LinkedIn, like go there, message them there, start a conversation. You know, it's more casual. With emails, it's like, I want to know, I read the previews of emails, you know, that's what I do. And I determine there if I'm interested or not.
Yeah.
And I read one the other day, and I opened it, and again, unfortunately, I wasn't interested in it. But it's the fact that I was like, I even screenshotted this. I emailed the person back saying like, this was a great follow up. This preview got me opening it. I'm not interested right now, but let's connect on LinkedIn because this could be something in the future. And it was like a problem statement about me and Twain. And then I'm trying to remember what he said, but it was almost like then the next three lines were like, I'll be honest, we messed. And then it was like, I'm curious, like, what did he mess up? And he clicked, and it ended up being something else. But I was like, but the email read and flowed really well. It was short. I could see the whole thing. And I was like, I want to let you know, this is a good email. This is a really good email. Timing's off, but you know, so yeah, it's a few things there, right? Like the cold calls, they work. Just follow up appropriately at timings. LinkedIn's a really easy place to communicate with people these days, and just make sure the email's good, right? Short, sharp, to the point, problem at the start, followed by the solution and benefits. Like that's the thing, I think, that it's in better quality.
Interesting. Interesting. I'm curious as to your thoughts on this, which is, you know, there's a stat out there that says like at any given time, 3% rule. I don't know if you're familiar, but like at any given time, there's only 3% of your actual market that's in a buying pattern, right? Which is why I think community is so important, is because what are you doing with the rest of the 97%? What are your thoughts on that? And I think also as it relates back to, you know, I think things like email and LinkedIn, you mentioned it's being oversaturated channels, but people still use them. And, you know, with AI now and like the ability, I think like the ability to still get access to these tools for people who don't have the experience or wealth of knowledge to best utilize them in a way, do you think like, you know, maybe competitors of Twain, or maybe people who are doing or leveraging Twain that are may or may not be having the skill sets actually to maximize or optimize for efficacy? How much of that is a concern for you? I think like that these tools are becoming more and more accessible, and yes, it's allowing for some personalization, but it's also perhaps giving, you know, a lot of tools to the wrong hands that's just going to continue to maybe like give them the ability to make even more noise in these already crowded channels.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about making a lot of noise, right, is you get numb to it, right? The same sound. If you live near a motorway, you suddenly, you know, and a friend pops over, like, oh, that's really loud. And you're like, what is? Because you're so used to it. And I think people are getting used to the noise of email. I really do. But I want to be specific there. They're getting used to the generic email, the casual AI generated email, and so on. And I think people, you know, so to stand out from that, if you just put the effort in to stand out, isn't that hard, but
Yeah.
you need direction to be able to do so. You probably need the good templates to do so, or you need the right tool. And, I would say Twain there, because I've done some videos comparing Twain to others, and it's fascinating the difference. And let me caveat this, right? Like, for example, with ChatGPT, you can make some really good emails, like really good ones, but you've got to know how to prompt it. And to do so, you've probably got to prompt it with, again, in this video, I remember doing this, and it was like, I got the email to the point where I was happy with it. And I prompted it with a lot of detail about the user I'm reaching out to. And then provided, I think, 9 more prompts to get it to the point where I was like, this is the template I want. It was under 60 words, open with a problem, came in with an assumption about said problem to test that against the ICP, then the solution that clarified the problem and the assumption, and then a bit of social proof with a nice like CTA. So like that was a lot of detail followed by 9. So you can do that. But I think that's what people need to do to stand out. So I don't necessarily think like all these tools giving people access to do this, because what will happen, right? This is what happens. And I guarantee this happens right now with teams, is they will eventually they'll get their reps, there'll be less training about it, and the reps will send out thousands of emails, and then suddenly the open rate starts to drop. And then they start realizing that they're damaging their domain slightly because they're getting hit by spam filters, this, that, and the other. They'll realize they're putting all this time into this outreach, and it's not generating anything, therefore they stop.
Yep.
Or the reps aren't generating enough, and therefore they don't hit their target. And then they'll shift to what does work for them. What they don't realize is that they're doing a bit more damage than good by doing it. But there will be companies out there who go about it in a completely different way, right? They open them up, they have multiple domains for outreach, they're being more, and they're going to win long term with email and so on. And I think, it'd be nice to be able to educate more people en masse that the first is not the right way to do it, and you can make it work. And that's my job at Twain. It's what a lot of influencers are doing on LinkedIn at the moment, like how to actually just email properly. And people then get results from it. It's fascinating. But I think a lot of people go the shortcut because they see an advert for a tool that this will do everything for you. And then before you know, like if you ask, I did a test the other day on writing ChatGPT emails, and then how many spam words it adds to the words emails. I did this across 10 different emails. All 10 emails had at least 2 spam words that would be flagged in the email. That's before doing any editing, right? So you then do that with your SDR or AE, and then they email 2,000 people, and that's getting flagged at the time, right? Like hearing that out loud, you'd be like, well, don't do that. That's silly, right? But people don't realize that's an issue a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I think people would, it's just the thing, right? People, they then start gravitating to what works. And that's also when you see the whole thing around like, cold email's dead, cold calling's dead, LinkedIn's dead. And what that is basically people trying something, it not working for them not putting the time in to develop it better to make it work. And then they'll just try something else that does work. And then they're like, oh yeah, cold calling doesn't work. Permission-based openers, they don't work. And it's like, how many people have you given a permission-based opener to? Like, they work, just not every time, but nothing works every time,
Yeah, absolutely.
I wouldn't say I'm worried about
it. Fair enough. On that note, I know we're rounding up on time. I just want to have one more last question here, but what are you personally excited about I think when we kind of just kicked things off before we started the conversation, I think that there's this line that's getting blurred between personal and professional. And I think a lot of our, personal motivations bleed into our professional ones. And just curious, is like, what's got you going? Are you excited to, what are you excited about for yourself in terms of like personal growth as it relates back to your work? Is it the stuff that you're doing at Twain? Is it the ability to kind of like put yourself in a position to self-learn and continue to grow? Is it continue to put more content out there, growing your LinkedIn usage? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's around like building the brand. And the thing is, I link my brand to what I'm helping people with. And it was fascinating. Last year, I kind of had this epiphany around like, I wanted all these exciting management jobs because I thought maybe the money would be exciting and motivating. But I realized that necessarily I wasn't necessarily motivated by money, which was a really interesting observation when you've been in sales. Does that mean I don't want to hit my target? Like, no, but like you get your paycheck and then that becomes normal, and then your paycheck goes and it becomes normal. And I realized like that's not the thing that's driving me, but then helping the people was, and it was, you know, the management, getting people promoted, I've absolutely always loved that. And then being able to do that on a bigger scale with LinkedIn and Sales Upskill, like that's now got 4,000 people on it, which I can't, when I started it, literally it's his 1 year birthday next week. And it's like a year ago, I was like dreaming of like 100 people would be amazing. It's like 4,000 now. It's like, I could put out some content that could help that many people. It's unreal. So I just want to keep pushing that. I want to keep growing that. And I think at Twain, and this is where the conversations with Mo when I was interviewing him really aligned with it, because what Twain's helping is helping people communicate better at the end of the day, because communication is really hard. And I do a lot of training on that as well, right? So it's lovely because I can kind of blend that in. There's a different motivation with Twain. Yeah, I'm employed there, but at the same time, I really believe in the mission and the value there. But outside of my personal life, it's like, how many more people can I help? And it's really interesting, because it's like, I'll be like, what are you going to do tonight? Could play Call of Duty. And then sometimes I will. And then sometimes I'm like, I'm going to make some resources for people. And it's like, that just sounds so weird when you say it out loud, but I'm doing this in my spare time. But, and I think that's bled into my personal life. Originally, I suppose it was work, but I just enjoy that. And then the nice thing is, like outside of work, I can then relax because I've helped people. I don't know what it is. It's a bizarre one. So hopefully I'll answer that question. It's sometimes I find that one always a really hard one to ask, because it's like, I'm doing a lot of this stuff on a Sunday as well. And it's like, why are you doing this on a Sunday? It's like, because I want to post it on Monday. And lots of people are going to possibly use it. Like, let's get it right. Let's make sure it's good. Like, I need Sunday for that.
Yep, fair enough. On that note, thanks so much for sharing your time and your experiences. Super great. Yeah, lots of great insights, lots of great nuggets from you.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thank you.
Thank you.